If, in buying a Focus-sized family hatchback, you merely want to buy a very good one and pay as little as possible for it, then Hyundai has a proposition for you. Its second generation i30. Smart, frugal, spacious and value-laden, this is one car that all the other big volume manufacturers are keeping their eye on. If any car could be said to have built its brand, it's this one, Hyundai's i30. Here we've the second generation version, expectations for which are high following the surprising excellence of its predecessor, a car that was crucial for this Korean maker. You see, back in 2007, when the original i30 model was launched, Hyundai was a budget brand, no more, no less. Hacks like me got behind the wheel expecting a cheap and cheerful Focus-sized family hatch. But we should have known better. We should have watched as Hyundai and its development partner Kia poached Europe's finest stylists and engineers, and known that the i30, like Kia Ceed, would be a car to challenge the market leaders. It was, and it still is. The very first version of this car was ahead of its time, of course, even though it matched class-leading standards of packaging, ride, handling, even interior quality. Many Golf and Focus owners weren't quite ready to trade in their enamelled key fobs and take the big driveway credibility step involved in owning one. No matter, the Korean company resolved to reap the real rewards in this segment with the second generation i30. This car launched here in the spring of 2012. It's a model styled to look sharper, spec'd to be better equipped and engineered to be more efficient, and it's a car that potentially should be very good indeed. Now, it says something about the progress that Hyundai has made over the last few years that many will come to this car expecting dynamic standards that match those of the class leaders. Cars like Ford's Focus and Volkswagen's Golf that have spent decades perfecting themselves in this area. Now, of those two, it's clearly the Golf that has been Hyundai's benchmark in development of this car. For this i30 is at least a match for its pricier German rival when it comes to ride and refinement. The sophisticated multi-link rear suspension that made the original version of this Korean design so surprisingly good in this respect has been retained and improved to the point where on poor surfaces you really do feel like you're in something much larger and expensive. No other car in this class is better at soothing away tarmac imperfections. And, provided you're not in a diesel model at startup where it can be a bit clattery, or cruising at high speeds where there's a bit of wind noise around the mirrors, it's also extremely quiet. There's a reason for that, or more accurately, 4 reasons. Anti-vibration engine mounts, hollow drive shafts, reprofiled door handles, and double-layered door seals. It's all about attention to detail, you see. A little ironically, the only area slightly lacking in this regard, steering precision, is the one to which the Korean engineers appear to have devoted the most effort. From mid-spec upwards, all models get what's called the flex steer system that you operate via this little button on the steering wheel, and it gives you 3 settings for the electric power steering: comfort, normal and sport. Now, given that comfort is rather over light and sport rather overly heavy, you end up leaving it in normal nearly all the time, which I think rather defeats the point. Yes, I know electric power steering is a difficult thing to get right, but I think next time it would be better if the Korean engineers just concentrated their efforts on creating one direct, incisive setup. No complaints about the engine lineup though, an area in which Hyundai has clearly done its homework on what appeals to European buyers. So there are no pointlessly powerful petrol models or super pricey hybrids. Just a sensible lineup which starts with a 100 PS entry-level petrol 1.4 for youngsters and budget buyers, or an auto-only 1.6 litre petrol for pensioners, before you get into the diesel models that most UK i30 customers will choose. Now, there's a variety of these to choose from at first glance, 90, 110 and 128 PS versions of the same 1.6 litre CRDI unit. But from there on in, the selection process gets a lot simpler. After all, the entry-level 90 PS variant it lacks Hyundai's eco-conscious blue drive tweaks, so it's actually the thirstiest and dirtiest of the three, and it doesn't actually save you much over the mid-spec 110 PS unit that I'm driving here. You could go for the 128 PS range topper, but it isn't much faster and it costs a slug more. So it's likely that even the least well-informed prospective I30 purchasers will end up on a test drive behind the wheel of the 1.6 litre CRDI 110 PS variant that I'm driving here. A car capable of much perkier performance than you'd expect from something capable of delivering over 75 miles to the gallon on the combined cycle and under 100 grams per kilometre of CO2. Rest to 60 takes a decently fleet 11.5 seconds. That's 2 seconds quicker than the entry-level diesel model, and it's only a fraction slower than the top 128 PS variant. Top speed is an academic 115 miles an hour. If there was one area where the original I30 came up conspicuously short of the top family hatchbacks, it was styling. It wasn't that there was anything wrong with the original car's shape. It was just that, well, can you remember what one looked like? No, I thought not. This one is decidedly more distinctive, with a European feel that hints at, say, Ford with its hexagonal grille. There's also a little of Peugeot in the sharply crafted wheel arches, but it has its own appeal too, thanks to a further development of the now quite familiar Hyundai fluidic sculpture styling theme that's most obvious in these swage lines that flare out of the front doors before sweeping backwards into the rear light clusters. Inside, equal effort has been made and there's just as much of a change for the better. Now, this cabin might not quite have the build solidity of a Golf or the flair of a Focus, but it's a more interesting place to be than either of those, only the shiny stalks betraying Hyundai's budget brand origins. Fragments of metallic brightwork may clearly be painted plastic, but they've been carefully chosen, and the floating spines that frame the centre console are stylish and neat. Build quality from the Czech factory seems to be strong, and the choice of soft touch plastics used around the dash shows more established brands how it should be done. The dials are clear, the buttons large and easy to use, and almost everything falls nicely to hand, except perhaps for the on-off switch for the stereo. That's a bit of a stretch. On top models, there's the option of an integrated 7-inch colour touchscreen for the sat-nav and infotainment system, and it's as good as anything that you'll find from a top premium brand. And there's evidence wherever you look of really careful design. The way that the ventilation and stereo controls have been moved further up than they would normally be, for example, to free up space in front of the gear stick. And there's plenty of room dotted around the cabin for various other cup holders and cubbies, including large door pockets that will each hold a 1.5 litre bottle. As for cabin space, well, despite the fact that this car rides on a wheelbase no larger than its predecessor, Hyundai insists that there's more of it. True enough, up front you do get more leg and shoulder room than before, and there's more headspace as well, even if you opt for the large panoramic glass roof. Seismic gains are less noticeable in the back, but there is slightly more shoulder room, and it is slightly easier now to fit in a centre rear-seated adult passenger if you have to, thanks to the way that the designers have reduced the size of the centre transmission tunnel. Out back, the rather pokey boot of the old I30 has been enlarged by 38 litres to 378 litres. Now, to put that in perspective, that's 62 litres bigger than a Ford Focus and 38 litres bigger than a Volkswagen Golf. Nice to have. If you need more and want to push the rear bench forward, you'll find that instead of the seatback mini flopping onto the cushion, that the seat bases push properly forward, facilitating a properly flat low bay, which has up to 1,316 litres of fresh air. The success of this car really is in Hyundai's own hands, but that'll only happen if they don't get too ambitious with its pricing. At first glance, that seems to have been realistically pitched. Okay, so a pricing span for most models in the £15,000 to £21,000 bracket doesn't sound especially cheap, but look a little closer in model-for-model comparisons with main rivals in the Focus-sized family hatchback sector, and you'll see that this car undercuts its obvious competitors by a significant amount. Body style choice is between this 5-door hatch or an estate that will cost you the usual premium of around £1,000 over the cost of your chosen variant. It's a pity that at the foot of the range there's such a large premium, around £1,700, to go from petrol to equivalently pokey diesel power, but then that's pretty much par for the course in this segment. If, like most UK buyers for this car, you do want a diesel, then I can't really see the point of going for the entry-level 90 PS version of the 1.6 CRDI, when for around £700 more, you could get the same engine with 110 PS, that's the version I've got here, and the Blue Drive Eco tweaks that mean that it's more frugal and it's faster. And this version is certainly better value than the range-topping 128 PS flagship diesel variant. So how does I30 pricing stand up in comparison with obvious family hatchback segment rivals? Pretty well, I think. This car's development stablemate Kia Ceed costs around the same. That car shares a number of the same engines. But that model apart, you're looking at a saving against most obvious competitors. Let's take the entry-level I30, the 1.4 litre 100 PS petrol model. Now, the most obvious rivals for that car are vehicles like Ford's Focus 1 litre T 100 PS, Vauxhall's Astra 1.4 16 valve 100 PS, or the Volkswagen Golf 1.2 TSI. But all of those will cost you between £1,500 and £2,000 more when it comes to list pricing. You might get a bit closer to this Hyundai sticker price if you went for equivalent versions of cars like Peugeot's 308 or Renault's Megane, but you'd still need about another £1,000 to own one of those. The standout I30 model, the 1.6 CRDI 110 PS Blue Drive diesel version, the car I've got here, can't offer quite such an eye-catching saving, but it can still undercut its significant rivals, say Ford Focus 1.6 TDCi 115 PS, which is about £1,000 more, or Vauxhall Astra 1.7 CDTi 130 PS, or a Volkswagen Golf 2 litre TDI 140. Both of those are around £1,500 more. And even if you did stretch to get one of this car's Japanese or European rivals, you'd have to sacrifice on equipment, because whichever I30 hatchback or estate model you choose, 1.4 or 1.6 litre petrol or any of the 1.6 litre CRDI diesels, you should find your car extremely well equipped. Even entry-level versions get daytime running lights, front fog lamps, air conditioning, Bluetooth compatibility for your mobile phone, a decent quality MP3 compatible CD stereo with AUX and USB compatibility, and controls on the multifunction steering wheel. You can also expect to find things like electrically heated and operated door mirrors and a hill holder clutch to stop you drifting backwards on uphill junctions. You've to stretch up to mid-spec level for the dynamic flex steer steering system with its choice of settings, and at that level you also get niceties like alloy wheels, cruise control and rear parking sensors. Nice to have options include satellite navigation, leather trim and a vast panoramic glass roof. No car in this category can afford to compromise on safety these days, and this one doesn't. So all variants get the expected twin front, side and curtain airbags, along with Isofix child seat fastenings. And to hopefully ensure that you never have to use any of this stuff, there are all the usual electronic driving aids. So ESP, of course, stability control, along with VSM, vehicle stability management, to help in situations where you're suddenly braking or accelerating on road surfaces that are maybe uneven or loose, and there's different traction available at different wheels. Plus there's the expected ABS anti-lock brakes that are made more effective in emergency stops by a brake assist system. Emergency stops that are advertised to following motorists by emergency stop signal flashing brake lights. Now, there's a significant standout model in the i30 lineup, and for me it's the mid-range diesel variant that I'm driving here, the 110 PS 1.6 litre CRDI. Though it offers perky performance, it's by some way more frugal and more eco-centric than most of the other variants across the lineup, thanks to what Hyundai calls its blue drive technologies. Now, these include things like low rolling resistance tyres, an alternator management system, and an ISG, that's integrated stop and go engine stop start system, that cuts the engine when you don't need it, say when you're stuck in traffic or you're waiting at the lights. Now, thanks to all this, it's able to return a combined cycle fuel figure of 76.3 miles to the gallon, and that'll give you an operating range of up to around 890 miles from a single fill of the 53-litre tank. Or to put it another way, it would enable you to travel from London to Italy without refuelling. And you'll be able to hold your head up high in eco circles too, thanks to a CO2 return of just 97 grams per kilometre. I need to highlight one caveat here though. Order this mid-range diesel model with the optional 6-speed automatic gearbox, and those running cost returns are decimated to 51.4 miles to the gallon on the combined cycle and 145 grams per kilometre of CO2. Who knew that using a stick shift could save you so much? Opt for the top diesel, that's the one with 128 PS, and you're looking at pretty similar running cost returns to those you get with the manual 110 diesel. So that's 74.3 miles to the gallon on the combined cycle and 100 grams per kilometre of CO2. Now, because the entry-level 90 PS diesel doesn't get the eco tweaks that are applied to its more powerful stablemates, it's actually thirstier and dirtier. So you're looking to returns of 68.9 miles to the gallon on the combined cycle and 109 grams per kilometre of CO2. That leaves petrol power. Now, assuming that, like me, you ignore the minority interest automatic only 120 PS 1.6 litre variant, that means we're talking about the least expensive i30 model, the 100 PS 1.4. Now, this manages 47.1 miles to the gallon on the combined cycle and puts out 139 grams per kilometre of CO2. Residual values, well, they're creeping ever closer to those of the mainstream brands as the market wakes up to the improving product quality that's being achieved by this Korean marque. There are various servicing and maintenance plans that can keep your ongoing costs down. Insurance groups range from 7E to 14E on the 1 to 50 grouping scale. And there's one of the best customer assurance plans in the industry, the Hyundai 5-year triple care warranty that gives you 5 years of mechanical cover, annual vehicle health checks and roadside assistance. With this second generation i30, Hyundai was in the unfamiliar position of having to replace a car that was already pretty good in the first place. A nice problem to have. We expected a smartening of the styling, an improvement in running costs, an addition of high-tech equipment and an extra dose of quality, all of which have been duly delivered by an i30 that's predictably good. The next step for this Korean brand is unpredictability, something truly groundbreaking that still ticks all the boxes on every family hatch buyer's wish list. And I've little doubt that one day Hyundai will provide it. Features like this car's unique flex steer system, proving the willingness to make that move. In the meantime, what we already have here is enough to leave the industry's more established car makers with furrowed brows. For the time being, the eyes have it.